Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Warlords of Draenor dungeon guide. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at one of the new dungeons that's become available with Warlords of Draenor, and this is Skyreach. Now this dungeon is available for entry by going to the Spires of Arak, which can be located on Draenor. If you'd like to view a written version of this dungeon guide, then please do head on over to flaskup.com or click on the link that's available in the video description below. If you'd like to skip to any specific boss in this dungeon, then please do use the annotations that are currently on screen now. The first boss in this dungeon goes by the name of Ranjit, and he's going to cheat a little bit by using the power of the wind and also razor sharp blades in order to try and bring down your party. His first ability is called Spinning Blade, and this will simply cause him to summon a spinning blade that will inflict physical damage to any enemies that get caught in its path. Now you can see exactly where this is on the ground, so you simply need to move away from it as it rotates on the spot. It's quite easy to move away from it because it doesn't move, it will stay in a fixed position. His next ability is called Fan of Blades, and this will cause him to hurl razor sharp blades in all directions, which will inflict physical damage and cause all affected targets to bleed over 6 seconds. Now there's no way of avoiding this ability, and unfortunately it's something that your healers have simply got to heal through. His next ability goes by the name of Wind Wall, and this will cause Ranjit to hurl a wind chakram at the location of a random enemy that will create a spinning wind wall upon impact. Now this wind wall will inflict nature damage to anyone that gets caught within its confines, so all you simply need to do is move away from the wind wall as it spawns. Again, it's quite obvious to see it, so you shouldn't be able to take damage from it if you do have your eyes open. His next ability goes by the name of Piercing Rush, and this will cause him to wind up a big attack, which will inflict a large amount of physical damage to their target if he does hit them. Now, this is quite easy to move away from because he kind of stands there with his spear under his arm, ready to charge for a short duration of time, and you can get a good idea of which direction he's going to go in. So you should be able to move to the side from him, and what we did notice is that if you get hit by this, it will also knock you back, so there is a chance you could get knocked off the platform that you're actually fighting the boss on. The next ability that Ranjit is going to cast goes by the name of Four Winds, and this will cause him to create 4 massive lines of wind that are going to spawn on the platform and basically divide it into quarters. But the fun doesn't stop there, because then this ability is going to either start rotating clockwise or anti-clockwise around the platform. It just depends what kind of mood Ranjit's in when he decides to rotate it. Now, while this is going off and you're running around in order to not get hit by the deadly damage that the 4 winds can deal to you, you will also need to be aware that the spinning blades can also still be on the platform at the same time. So you could have spinning blades rotating around while also moving away from the 4 winds that will be rotating around, and by God, I hope you do not have motion sickness because there's a lot of rotating in this fight. Now on the heroic mode version of this encounter, Ranjit will gain a new ability that he'll throw at your raid, and this is called Lens Flare. And this is where he will call upon High Sage Viryx, who is the final boss in this dungeon, in order to focus down a beam of sunlight in order to follow a randomly chosen target. Now this beam is going to trail after the victim, and it will cause the ground behind it to burn anyone for a moderate amount of fire damage every second. So it's basically creating more stuff on the ground that you're going to have to not stand in order to not take damage while moving around from the blades that are going here, there and everywhere. Basically this fight has got a lot of movement involved with it, so if you need to stand there in order to cast abilities, you're probably not going to have too much fun, unfortunately. The second boss in this dungeon goes by the name of Araknath, who is a kind of construct-like thing that seems to have been observing Draenei people for some time and is now here to basically try and break your party within a few seconds if not dealt with correctly, putting it politely of course. His first ability goes by the name of Smash, nice and simple, and this will cause him to smash the ground, inflicting great physical damage to anyone that is within the area. Now this is mainly going to be focused on your tank, so if you are a melee player, you want to make sure that you're not standing near the tank or on the tank when this smash ability does go off, as you're going to take excessive damage for no reason. His next ability is called Burst, and this will cause him to release a burst of energy that will inflict fire damage to all enemies within 100 yards. So basically anyone that's within the room that's fighting him, and every time this ability is used, the damage of the next burst is going to be increased by 7%. So if you take the first burst, you live through that, congratulations. You take the next one, its damage is going to be increased by 7%. You take the one after that, it's going to be 14%. And you take the next one after that, it's going to be 21% extra damage. Now on normal mode this might not be much, but on heroic mode this damage ramps up very fast, so you're going to need to make sure that you are kind of killing the boss as fast as you can. And I do recommend, if it's available, you use Time Warp, Bloodlust Heroism in order to burn him down as fast as possible. His final ability goes by the name of Energize, and it sounds like something out of Transformers or Power Rangers, but nevertheless it's quite a cool ability. Now this will cause one of the Sun Construct prototypes to reflect incoming light rays at the Construct, who goes by the name of Araknath, otherwise known as the Boss, in order to heal him for 125% of his maximum health every second. Now, obviously you don't want this to happen, so you're able to step into the beams in order to prevent this, but the downside is you will take fire damage every second that you are standing in the beams. Now this fire damage doesn't ramp up or anything like that, it's kind of like a static amount of damage every second. But again, on heroic mode this really does hurt, so if you are soaking one of the beams and burst goes off, there is a chance it could one-shot you, so you will need to use cooldowns or healing cooldowns when needed in order to deal with the damage. The next boss in this dungeon goes by the name of Rukhran, which is a lovely name might I add, and he's basically a big bird that likes to kind of imitate G-Kun if you cast your mind back to the Throne of Thunder raid. Now his first ability is called Pierce Armor, and this will cause him to pierce the tank's armor, or his current target should I say, and this will leave them with a pierced armor debuff. Now this will cause them to receive 10% more damage from Pierce Armor for each application of the pierced armor debuff. Now you can mitigate this, and obviously because there's only going to be one tank in a 5-man dungeon, you can mitigate it by using your active mitigation abilities. Obviously if you don't use your active mitigation, you're going to keep on getting stacks of the pierced armor debuff, and you're going to take silly amounts of damage, which in turn is going to cause your healers to not be able to keep up with the healing, and you're going to eventually just die. His next ability is called Summon Solar Flare, and this is a nice way of saying summon a little bird of doom that's going to fixate on someone and follow them around the room. Now when Solar Flare is cast, it's going to inflict a moderate amount of fire damage to anyone that is within 5 yards of the impact zone, and it's going to basically spawn a little bird that will fixate on a player, as I just mentioned. Now, any piles of ash that are within 5 yards of this Solar Flare are going to be reanimated into a Solar Flare, and I'll speak about that in a moment. Now these birds that spawn have got two abilities. The first one goes by the name of Sunstrike, and this will cause the bird to explode, inflicting a very high amount of fire damage to anyone that's within 10 yards, and it will subsequently afflict everyone that's out of the 10-yard range with half of the fire damage he would normally deal. Now this explosion will cause the caster or the little bird to go dormant and become a little pile of ash. Now this is what I was talking about with the first ability. So if any of the bird's abilities or the summoning of the Solar Flare are done on a pile of ash, then another bird will spawn at the same time. Now the bird's second ability is called Sunburst, and this will cause them to explode again, inflicting a small amount of fire damage to anyone within 10 yards. Again, this will force them to go dormant. And again, just like with the other abilities, if there are any piles of ash within 5 yards, the caster will activate that pile of ash and it will become another bird. So putting it in kind of simple terms, if the birds spawn, well when the birds spawn, if they fixate on you, you can kite them around, that's fine, or you can kill them off. Now, if you kill them off, they're going to deal high amounts of damage and explode, and they'll also spawn any other birds if they get killed near a pile of ash. Or you could kite them around and they're going to deal damage to anyone that's within 10 yards. but if you run them over a pile of ash, they will still spawn another bird. So it's kind of it's one of those lovely catch-22 situations where whatever you do, you're going to end up worse off. Rukhran's next ability is called Screech, and this will inflict a small amount of physical damage to every enemy in the area, and it will also increase their damage taken from Screech and Quills, which is a heroic only ability, by 10%. So this is a stacking buff on the boss / debuff against the players, and this is kind of a soft enrage for the encounter, as the more times he deals Screech, the more damage you're going to eventually take. And on heroic mode, Rukhran's got one more ability you're going to have to deal with, and this goes by the name of Quills. Now, this will cause him to inflict a moderate amount of physical damage to everyone that's within the area, and it will also increase your damage taken from Screech and Quills by 10%. So obviously on heroic mode, Quills and Screech work together quite well for the boss. Now you can dodge the damage from Quills by standing behind the pillar that's in the middle of the room and line of sighting the big bird so that he can't see you or the Quills can't hit you in order to deal damage to you. And the final boss in this dungeon goes by the name of High Sage Viryx, and he's going to try and throw you off the platform, set you on fire, and also shield himself in order to try and stop you from defeating him. Now his first ability is called Cast Down, and this is going to cause him to summon a solar zealot in order to grab a player and try and throw them over the balcony. Now this is a little bit of a throwback to the Lich King, I guess, and the Valkyrie and how they used to take you off the side, but that's me going off on a tangent there. Now, when the Solar Zealots target a player, you will be made aware that they are targeting you, so you want to run as far away as you can from the side of the room to the kind of middle away on the opposite side, so it takes you longer to reach the edge, and your DPS need to target the Zealot as soon as it spawns in order to start bringing it down. It's worth noting you can use snares and stuns in order to slow it down and have more time to kill it off. His next ability is called Lens Flare, and just like on the first fight, this is going to cause him to focus a beam of sunlight onto a randomly chosen target, and this beam is going to trail the victim for a short while, causing the ground that's left behind to be set on fire and burn any enemies for a moderate amount of fire damage every second. You need to simply run away from this beam and try and kite it smartly and not through the middle of the room, like around the edge or to the side somewhere out the way. And make sure you don't stand in the fire when it does spawn. His next ability is called Solar Burst, and this will simply cause him to inflict a high amount of fire damage to an enemy. It's worth noting that this ability is interruptible and should be interrupted as and when it is going to be cast. And his final ability is called Shielding, and this will cause him to spawn an Araknath shield construct, and this will begin to extend a shield over the High Sage, preventing 99% of damage from all sources. When this little shield construct spawns, you simply need to switch targets to him and kill it off in order for him to stop shielding the High Sage, and then you can carry on with the fight once the little construct has been defeated. So that's going to do it for this Warlords of Draenor dungeon guide. Hopefully it helps you get through the dungeon with minimal problems and also helps you get that shiny loot to move on to raiding. If you would like to view a written version of this guide, then you can head on over to flaskup.com and hover over the little Dungeons tab at the top of the page, or alternatively, click on the link in the video description below to go directly to our dungeon page for this dungeon. If you would like to stay up to date with all of the latest Flaskup news, Warlords of Draenor news, and also know when our new guides for both dungeons and heroics are released, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.